Inspired by the butter yellow trend, I picked up this soft cotton acrylic yarn and I knew instantly what I wanted to make with it. Back in high school, I had this yellow t-shirt with a smiley face that said, "Have a nice day." I loved it, but like every teenager back then, I cut it up. Does anyone else remember doing that? Now I'm going to make a more grown-up version. I have seen some knit versions around online, so I at least know it's possible and I actually really quite like the look. Remember before commenting that knitting machines can be life-changing for some and fun or freeing for others. Let's keep the comments an empowering space free from ableism and judgment. As always, I start with a swatch to get gauge, but also as a test of concept. So what I am thinking is drop stitches. Swatch measured around 15 centimeters before and 25 centimeters after. So every stitch went from 7 millimeters to 20 millimeters. I was not expecting the stitches to grow that much. I might be able to make this with just a front and back panel. How exciting. But do I like how it looks? So after pondering this for a few days, I decided to at least do some swatches. I did one swatch where I skipped the needle manually, hoping for less distance. And then I did another swatch where I dropped every third stitch to make the dropped and non-dropped sections more even. Okay, so taking a look at the three swatches, this is the original one again where I did 2 stitches and then dropped one in between. And then this was the swatch I did where I did 3 stitches and then dropped one in between. So we didn't actually lose that much length, to be honest. It turned out about the same. So I'm torn between these two, to be honest. And this was the other one I did. Just push those out of the way. Where I did it manually, which I don't really like. It doesn't, I don't know, it looked a bit messy, the tension's a bit all over the place, and it was not fun to do, so that one's not being considered. But out of these two, which one do I like best? To be honest, I'm sort of leaning towards the original one. Anyway, I'm thinking this is going to be a quick project, so I might just make this, and then if it turns out I don't like it, make it again like this. We'll see. I mean, you'd have seen the final result already, so you know how it turned out and what I decide. But I think we'll go with this one. So let's go work out the pattern. I like to use Google Sheets or Excel to make my patterns. I resize the columns to be squares and then number each square to represent each needle on the machine. For flat panels on my machine, which is the Sentro, that's 44 needles. I also add an arrow showing which way I am spinning. That just keeps me right. Knitting bottom up, my body will be 69 rows. You may want more or less rows depending on if you're taller or shorter than me. I am 5'2". For working out the neckline, I find the center, and generally a neckline is a third, so 44 divided by 3, about 15. We need an even number, so I round that up to 16. So 8 stitches on either side of the center is needles 15 to 30. I want a sloped neckline, so rather than casting off all those stitches at once, I'll cast off half to start with, 8 needles in the middle. So working out row 1 of the neckline, I'll knit to needle 19 and then cast off 8 stitches. Then going back the way I came, next row I'll cast off another. I continue like that until I'm casting off needle 15. Then I can knit the final rows that will be the shoulder. Then I work out the pattern for the other side, which is just a mirror image. This is where the arrows really come in handy, so I know which way to start when I put it back on the machine. Right, we have a plan. We're going to knit 69 rows, knit the right side, and then the left side. Let's give this a go. So I cast on using the basic in front and behind cast on, going from needle 1 up to needle 44. I add the working yarn and then it's just back and forth for 69 rows. I prefer to stand when using my machine. Is that weird? I like to look at it from above so I can keep an eye on the pins and on the needle. That way I can catch any dropped stitches quickly. I also just find it quite mesmerising watching the needles rise and the stitches drop. And of course, watching the piece grow is very satisfying. What about you? Do you stand when you use your machine or do you sit? After the 69 rows, it's time to work on the neckline. So linking back to the pattern, for row 1, knit to needle 19, remove the yarn from the guide and pop it in the centre of the machine. Drop the needles until we get to a point where needle 27 is about to lift. We need to keep that stitch secure. Then start removing the stitches from the machine. Keep your darning needle flat to the machine. You don't want to lift up as you remove a stitch, or you might risk lifting off the stitch next to it before you have secured it. For the last 3, I use a loom pick to help me remove the stitches, as those needles hadn't dropped. Needle 25 was too high for me to remove with the loom pick, so I just secured the stitch and waited until I was heading back to remove it. Spin back to where the working yarn is, pop it back into the guide, and we can now knit row 2. And then it's just a case of following the pattern to remove the other 4 stitches in a staggered formation. Once the neckline is shaped, which took less than 5 minutes, it's time to knit the shoulders, which is just easy back and forth again for 30 rows. Remove it from the machine and the right side is complete. So for the left side, we need to reattach the yarn. So we'll cut the yarn and insert it into the machine at needle 44. Knit rows 1 and 2. For row 3, we'll be removing the final stitch. Yarn out of the guide, lower the needles, pick up the last stitch using the waste yarn and darning needle, and following the pattern to remove the other 3 stitches in the neckline, and finally knitting back and forth for 30 rows. And here she is in all her glory. Time to drop the stitches. Ta-da! Now for the back. I just did a basic rectangle of 44 needles and 106 rows. Again, you might need to adjust the rows if you're taller than I am. Now I have the back and front pieces, I can sew up the shoulder seams. I used a Kitchener stitch and I tried my best to maintain the width of the dropped stitches. I think I did an okay job. Okay, so this is the top on, and I think when I finish off the neckline it will pull it all up and in a little bit. I don't think it's actually wide enough for me to do this with just 2 panels, because if I was to connect them to the side, we've got some pulling here which I don't like. So I'm going to make these panels bigger. I'm just going to add a side panel in here, and then I'm going to do a little cap sleeve as well, because these are not coming over as much as I thought they would. But if you have a smaller frame than me, you could probably just seam up the sides and be done. But I'm going to have to do a little bit more work just to make this fit how I want it. I didn't really want something skin tight. Okay, so let's figure out how big we want these side panels to be. Ruler, really scientific method here. Of about that much, I think. Nice loose fit. Yeah. Okay, so that's about 10 centimeters. So then I'll measure along the front of this work and we'll see how many stitches that is for 10 centimeters. And then for the length of the panel, I think I'm just going to grab a stitch marker and just put where I want the armpit to be. So try and put my arm down, maybe a bit more natural. Think about there. Very awkwardly. Right there. Yeah, that's okay. Maybe a little higher, so maybe I'll move that a bit higher. But yeah, okay. And then I'll just work out the sleeve from there. Okay, so now I know that I need 10 centimeters on either side. We're going to see how long that actually is. So if I lay this down on here, lining up with one side there, 10 is here. So I'm actually going to include this because we're going to need these parts for seaming. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So I'll cast on 11 stitches and I'll knit up to where I put my stitch marker in. So I'll count off camera how many rows this is. I'll pop it on the screen. So it's going to be 11 stitches by however many rows, and I'm going to need 2 of those. Back to the machine, I knit the side panels, casting on the 11 stitches and knitting 74 rows. And I made 2 of those. Then it was the same process as before, dropping the stitches. I was careful when dropping the stitches to rework the waste yarn on the edges, so that the ladders don't get bigger than I planned. I sewed up the sides with a mattress stitch. It actually looks really seamless. I'm really starting to get excited about finishing this now. But one more step, the sleeves. First thing I need to do was count the stitches around the sleeve so I know how many rows I am doing. And then decide how long I want the sleeves. I don't want them too long as this is an Aran yarn, and despite all the gaps, I think it still will be quite warm. So I'm going to go for a t-shirt length. But I am nearly out of yarn. So the sleeves are on hold while I await for the delivery. But while I wait, I'll make a start on the finishings on the neckline and the hem with this little bit of yarn that I have left. Yay, the yarn has finally arrived. I've started doing a podcast, so subscribe if you want to see what this other yarn will be used for. But back to the machine to knit the sleeves and finish off this project. Okay, so time for some final thoughts. This is the finished sweater. I like it, but I don't love it. There's a couple of things I would change. So it came out a lot longer than I thought, which meant that the neckline is a bit lower than I would like, and it's actually a lot longer than I would like. I think I would probably prefer a bit more of a crew neck, and I think I would want it to end at, my natural waist for when I'm wearing it over the top of dresses, which is a little frustrating as I did buy an extra ball as I ran out of yarn. And if I had have had it the length that I wanted it, I probably wouldn't have needed that extra ball. The other thing I'm not a huge fan of is the edging on the bottom. I did it a few times and I just couldn't find an edging that I liked or that sat well. I probably should have tried different crochet hooks, but I was starting to get a bit disheartened with the project at that point after having to do separate side panels and separate sleeves. It turned out to be a lot more work than I thought it was. It wasn't a one-day make. I had to wait for more yarn to turn up. So I just wanted it to be finished. So I'm not happy with the edging that I did, but actually when it was a bit too long for me and I was folding it up to try and make it a little bit shorter, I actually think I should have done a folded hem. So I am going to make this again, possibly not in yellow because we're coming to the end of summer, but I think I would kind of like a forest green one, maybe. I think that would be nice coming into autumn. Maybe even an orange and brown one, like one that changes colour. I think that might be quite nice. And I might actually like a white one as well for wearing over the top of this dress. And I might try a V-neck, try and match the V-neck for wearing this dress because it's just a strappy vest and it doesn't have sleeves. and I don't wear it because of that. But things that I do love is I love the sleeves, how they turned out. So actually that was a blessing in disguise, having separate sleeves. I love the seaming on the sleeves and on the side panels. I think it looks practically invisible. I'd like to think if you didn't know that I'd added a side panel in, you couldn't tell. So I'm really happy about that. I actually quite like that the pattern on the sleeve goes in the same direction. Because usually you'd knit sleeves from here that way, whereas these sleeves were knit in the round. So I quite like that. I'm definitely going to be keeping that on my next ones, and it also means I don't have to do any edging on the sleeve because it's the side of the panel. So, and it doesn't really roll that much. So loving that. I love the overall texture of it. As you've seen, I wore this out in the sunshine and it's hot. It's in the high 20s, which is really hot for the UK, and I was absolutely fine. I'm actually a little bit hotter in the house than I was filming out in the sunshine. But I do think maybe I'd want a bit of a longer sleeve, and maybe I'd do a cuff, and then maybe I could do some actual ribbing. Yeah, but I think this is definitely going to be, forgive the cat making some noise. But yeah, I feel like I like this, but I don't love it. But I feel like with a few tweaks, I could absolutely love this. So thanks for watching. I hope you found it helpful. I'm not going to write this up as a pattern because I think it is something maybe a little bit niche. But if you are interested in a pattern, let me know. And if I get a few requests, maybe I will write it up with a few different neckline options if you like the scoop neck, or if I end up doing a crew one. Yeah, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.